It's biblical tales. God floods the earth, sparing Noah, his family, and 2 of every animal on board his ark. Now an international team of researchers have found new evidence that a famous formation in Turkey could be the site of the ancient vessel. When a team of archaeologists began excavating on one of the highest mountains in Turkey, they expected to find nothing more than ancient remains. But within just a few days, they uncovered something that changed everything. Deep beneath the surface was a massive sealed structure that no one was prepared for. At first, some believed it could be the remains of Noah's Ark. But the moment the first scan appeared on the screen, the entire lab fell silent because what they saw did not look like any normal ship. No one spoke. Everyone just stared, trying to understand what was in front of them. Within hours, fear began to spread among the team, and some even wanted to stop the excavation immediately. Then suddenly, without any clear explanation, authorities stepped in and shut the entire site down. At that point, the question was no longer what they had found, but what was so serious that it had to be hidden from the world. And as this story moves forward, what you're about to discover will become even more shocking and unsettling. If you are new, make sure to subscribe because this is just the beginning. In the eastern region of Turkey, hidden among the mountains, lies a mysterious site known as the Darupanar structure. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than an ordinary slope. But when viewed from above, its shape strongly resembles that of a visual ship. Because of this unusual formation, many believe this could be the very place where Noah's Ark once came to rest. And this is where things start to get really interesting. On one hand, the story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood is described in the Bible. On the other hand, modern science largely considers it a myth, arguing that a global flood of that scale is nearly impossible. Yet, despite scientific doubts, similar flood stories appear in cultures all around the world. This is exactly why locations like Darupanar continue to fascinate people and remain shrouded in mystery. In 2021, a group of Turkish archaeologists officially began excavations at this site. Their initial objective was simple: to determine whether this formation was purely natural or something more significant. As the digging progressed, they uncovered soil samples containing marine traces, materials typically found near oceans not high up in the mountains. This alone was enough to raise eyebrows. At first, the excavation moved forward in a normal and controlled manner. But everything changed when the team introduced ground-penetrating radar, also known as GPR, a technology used to reveal what lies beneath the surface without extensive digging. The researchers expected to see ordinary rock layers, but what appeared on the screen left them stunned. The scans revealed a massive hollow formation underground. It wasn't solid rock. It had an internal structure, something organized and clearly shaped. As they continued scanning, the full outline gradually became visible. And then came the moment that shocked everyone. The dimensions of this hidden structure seemed to perfectly match the measurements described for Noah's Ark in the Bible, around 300 cubits in length. Some team members even referenced Genesis 6:15, where the ark's exact proportions are detailed: 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. What once sounded like a legend was now beginning to look like a real physical structure buried beneath the ground. The field lab fell into complete silence. No one spoke. There was a mix of excitement, disbelief, and an unsettling sense of fear because one question lingered in everyone's mind. If this truly is what it appears to be, then how did it end up here? The radar results only intensified the mystery. While they fueled excitement, they also raised an even bigger question. Was something like this even scientifically possible? Because if this structure truly came from a ship, then according to modern science, it simply shouldn't have survived. Think about it. Something made of wood stretching hundreds of feet would normally collapse under its own weight. Without advanced engineering, maintaining the stability of such a massive structure is nearly impossible. And here they were looking at something that could be thousands of years old. Scientists have always argued that any wooden structure buried underground for that long would have already decayed. Time pressure and moisture would have destroyed it completely. And that's exactly where disagreements within the team began. Some archaeologists were convinced this was nothing more than a natural formation, a case of misinterpretation. They argued that the human brain often tries to find patterns, sometimes seeing organized structures where none actually exist. But not everyone agreed. The engineers in particular were far less convinced. According to them, the radar data didn't behave like natural geology. The signals coming back were too consistent, each reflection appearing at equal distances, forming clear and repeating patterns. And that detail mattered a lot because in nature, such perfect symmetry is extremely rare. One engineer even pointed out, natural rock formations don't create straight, evenly spaced corridors or beam-like structures like this. The moment that was said, the mood in the room shifted. This was no longer just curiosity. It was turning into something far more serious. As more data came in, it became harder to dismiss this as something ordinary. The team didn't rely on a single scan. They ran multiple scans from different angles and depths just to eliminate any chance of error. But instead of clearing doubts, each new scan made the structure even more defined and far more unsettling. What appeared on the screen was no longer just a vague outline. Inside there were clear passage-like formations, almost like corridors. In some areas, these sections even seemed connected, forming what looked like an organized internal layout. And the most surprising detail, these divisions or beams were perfectly spaced, almost too perfect. That's when confidence started to crack. In natural mountain formations, layers are usually irregular, uneven, broken, unpredictable. But here, everything looked deliberate. Almost as if it had been constructed following a precise design. A senior engineer carefully analyzing the data finally said, "This isn't random, this is design." And with those words, the tension in the room deepened. Even those who had been skeptical fell silent. The excitement that once filled the team was now slowly being replaced by an uneasy sense of fear. Every new scan raised more questions, and every answer only made things more complicated. As they began to map out the structure more clearly, the team decided to push further. This time, they increased the radar's power, hoping to get a deeper and clearer image of what lay beneath. Everyone expected to see more of the same corridors, divisions, repeating patterns. But what appeared next changed everything. On the screen, a distinct section emerged. Something that looked like a sealed chamber, slightly separated from the rest of the structure as if it had been intentionally closed off. And then came the most shocking discovery. Within that chamber, a faint heat signal was detected. At first, the team assumed it had to be an error. After all, it's nearly impossible for something buried that deep, especially something ancient, to still emit heat. Anything underground for thousands of years should be completely cold and lifeless. But when they switched to thermal imaging and zoomed in, the signal became clearer. There it was, a bright, well-defined spot inside the sealed chamber. This wasn't noise or interference. It looked like something was actively generating heat. At that moment, everyone in the room became fully alert. A technician quickly analyzed the data and calculated the depth. The signal was coming from approximately 8 to 8 feet below the surface, directly from within that sealed section. For a brief moment, the entire room froze. Then, in a hushed voice, someone murmured, "This can't be real." Without wasting time, the team initiated another scan, hoping the first result had been nothing more than a technical glitch. But when the new data came through, it showed the exact same thing. Same spot, same strength, same heat pattern. At that point, there was no denying it. Whatever was inside that chamber was steadily producing heat. Curiosity quickly gave way to unease. No one could come up with a logical explanation. If this were a natural source, the heat would rise and fall, maybe even vanish over time. But this signal, it was constant, unwavering. And that's what made it so unsettling. Despite the growing tension, the team pushed forward, examining every detail with even greater care. This time, they focused on the radar readings, especially the signals bouncing back from within the structure. And that's when they uncovered something even more alarming. Certain reflections stood out. They didn't match the rest. When those signals were isolated, it became clear they weren't behaving like wood or stone. Instead, they carried a distinct metallic signature, almost as if something made of metal was hidden inside. At first, the team assumed it might be a natural mineral deposit, but as the data sharpened, that theory began to fall apart. The pattern suggested something far more deliberate: metal elements embedded within the structure, possibly reinforcing beams or joints. And that's when things took a darker turn. If this interpretation was correct, it meant the structure wasn't purely wooden. It had been engineered carefully, intentionally, using methods that seemed far too advanced for its supposed age. Because according to everything known, this structure dated back to the Bronze Age, or perhaps even earlier, and civilizations from that era simply didn't possess the tools or knowledge to construct something this massive with internal metal support. One of the engineers staring at the data finally broke the silence. This design, it looks like something from modern engineering. The moment those words were spoken, the room went quiet again. Up until now, the situation had felt strange. But now it was becoming unsettling on a whole new level. This wasn't just an ancient mystery anymore. It felt like something that didn't belong to its time at all. The structure, the persistent heat, the metallic signals, everything had already created an undercurrent of fear within the team. But the shift became even more intense when the conversation moved beyond science. One team member familiar with biblical texts quietly referenced Matthew 24:37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the last days. As soon as he said it, the mood in the room changed. What had once been a purely scientific discussion began drifting into something deeper, more personal. He went on to explain how the verse describes a time before the Great Flood, when people were caught up in their daily lives, ignoring every warning until destruction came suddenly and without mercy. Hearing this, several team members fell silent. The comparison felt uncomfortably relevant. Even today, humanity often overlooks serious threats: climate change, global instability, moral decline, choosing to carry on as if nothing is wrong. And now, standing before a structure that might be tied to that ancient past, the parallel felt even more disturbing. Slowly, tension turned into fear. Some team members began voicing their concerns, openly suggesting the research should stop altogether. One researcher spoke bluntly: if this information gets out, people could misinterpret it. It might cause widespread panic. Another added that this wasn't just an archaeological finding anymore. It had the potential to spiral into something much bigger. Something that could ignite fear and speculation across the world. Soon, discussions about stepping away from the project began to surface. Inside the field lab, the atmosphere had completely shifted. What started as curiosity had transformed into something far heavier. Something no one had been prepared for. The excitement that once filled the room had completely disappeared, replaced by a heavy silence and an unspoken fear. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, as if they all sensed that something was seriously wrong. Until now, the team had only been studying the structure from the outside. But after detecting so many unusual signals, they realized they had no choice but to look inside. For the first time, they decided to attempt a physical entry into the sealed chamber. They prepared a thin microbore probe designed to pass through a small drilled opening into the structure. As the drilling began, all eyes were fixed on the machine. The outer surface looked extremely strong, so they expected it to be difficult to penetrate. But surprisingly, the moment the probe touched the surface and moved forward, it slid in much more easily than expected. That alone felt strange. From the outside, the structure appeared solid, yet inside it felt as if a path had already been made. Then came the real shock. The instant the probe entered the chamber, the radiation detector on the console reacted. Initially, the display showed normal levels. But within seconds, it shifted from green to yellow and then to orange. The radiation levels were rising rapidly. The entire room went silent. No one could explain how a sealed wooden chamber supposedly thousands of years old could emit radiation. It didn't match any known natural phenomenon. Before the team could fully process this, another strange reading appeared. The pressure sensors began to show a steady rise and fall in the air pressure inside the chamber. This wasn't random. It followed a consistent rhythm, almost as if something inside was slowly expanding and contracting. The data from the probe had already unsettled everyone, but they continued with the next step, chemical analysis of the inner material. Using the probe, they collected microscopic samples from the walls and immediately examined them in the field lab. At first, they expected to find ordinary wood But when the results came in, the atmosphere shifted again. The inner walls were coated with a thick layer of a tar-like substance, pitch. This was the same material mentioned in the biblical description of Noah's Ark, where it was used to seal the structure. That alone was surprising, but the real twist came under microscopic analysis. The pitch wasn't ordinary. It contained traces of ash, along with tiny crystal-like particles that didn't match any known local minerals. Even more unsettling was the fact that these crystals didn't appear randomly scattered. They formed patterns as if they had been deliberately arranged. One researcher quietly noted that it didn't look natural, that there seemed to be an intentional design within it. Hearing that brought back the same uneasy feeling in the room. At that moment, a team member familiar with ancient Hebrew pointed out something important. He explained that the word often translated as pitch can also mean covering, protection, or even containment. Something meant to keep what's inside from escaping. This interpretation changed everything. If the coating was only meant to keep water out, that would be one thing. But if it was designed to contain something within, then the situation was far more serious. By now, all the findings, the heat signal, the radiation, and the pressure changes seemed to be pointing toward the same disturbing possibility. And that realization only grew stronger as the team moved forward. After analyzing the probe data, they decided to investigate a narrow tunnel connected to the sealed chamber. The passage was extremely tight and buried in complete darkness. Using a remote mechanical arm fitted with a small camera, they slowly began exploring inside. As light entered the tunnel for the first time, everything seemed to pause. Something was scattered across the floor. At first, it looked like broken pieces of wood, but as the camera moved closer, the truth became clear. They were bones, and these were not normal bones. Their shape, color, and overall appearance were unusual. Even more disturbing was the way they were arranged. They weren't scattered randomly. They appeared to be placed in a deliberate pattern, as if someone had arranged them intentionally. One researcher quietly remarked that this didn't look like collapsed debris. It looked more like a controlled or quarantine-like setup. The room fell silent again. The team then began a closer analysis of the bones. The first thing they noticed was the rib structure. The spacing was completely abnormal, with ribs packed so tightly together that normal breathing would have been nearly impossible. This didn't match any known animal species, and with that realization, the fear in the room deepened even further. Then the camera slowly shifted toward the jaw, and what appeared next made everything even more unsettling. The structure had a partially reptilian look, but it didn't fully match any known species. Its jaw was built with a double hinge, allowing it to open far wider than normal, and the teeth were uneven, different sizes and shapes that didn't belong to any recognized creature. But the most disturbing feature was the spine. Instead of being straight, it twisted into a spiral form as if it had been unnaturally shaped. One team member admitted they had never seen anything like this in any biological record. By this point, curiosity had completely turned into fear. Some stepped back. Others looked away because this was no longer just a discovery. It was something beyond understanding. The bones had already shaken the team, but the real shock came when they were tested for DNA. Tiny samples were carefully collected and placed into a portable sequencing machine, while everyone watched the screen waiting for answers. At first, only fragmented sequences appeared, but as the system continued analyzing, the mood in the room began to change. The software repeatedly attempted to match the DNA with global databases, but each time the result came back the same. No match. Silence filled the space. It didn't belong to any known category of life. Eventually, the system labeled it as unknown, suggesting either a completely extinct species or something never recorded before. A geneticist quietly noted that the DNA didn't align with any modern organism, and that realization began to settle heavily on everyone present. At that moment, a Bible scholar mentioned an ancient description of beings that were neither fully human nor fully animal, but something mixed or corrupted. The idea made several people uncomfortable, because it suggested that this structure might not have been built only to preserve life, but also to separate or contain something dangerous. That possibility changed the entire perspective of the discovery. It wasn't just about survival. It might have been about control. As the camera continued through the tunnel, deep claw marks became visible on the walls. But what made them truly disturbing was their direction. They were carved from the inside outward, as if something had tried to escape. That realization brought a heavy silence across the room. Moving further ahead, the team noticed strange markings that initially looked like scratches, but under focused light, they revealed themselves to be a structured script. Though not fully matching any known language, the symbols showed patterns similar to very early writing systems. After enhancing the images digitally, a few phrases became readable, and what they revealed left everyone speechless. The words were not simple warnings. They were direct instructions, suggesting that something had been deliberately bound, sealed, and never meant to be released. Nearby rough sketches appeared to map the structure, and when compared with earlier scans, they aligned perfectly. The largest sealed section matched the same area where heat radiation and pressure anomalies had already been detected. By now, there was no doubt left. As the team moved forward, they reached a large corridor that ended at a massive door. This door was unlike anything else in the structure, thick, reinforced, coated with pitch, and strengthened with heavy metal plates as if it had been designed to remain closed forever. Its surface was covered in deep impact marks, all coming from the inside, suggesting repeated attempts to break through. Even the hinges appeared fused, as though they had once been exposed to extreme heat, leaving the metal warped and the wood partially burned without any clear source. The realization slowly became unavoidable. The structure wasn't just built to protect life, but to contain something within it, to confirm what lay beyond the door. The team conducted one final seismic scan. They expected stillness, but instead a faint, steady pattern appeared on the screen. It wasn't random. It had a rhythm almost like a biological movement. At the same time, thunder echoed outside and the signal intensified, as if whatever was inside was somehow responding. The room fell completely silent as the final scan frame appeared. Behind the sealed door, a faint mass could be seen, shifting slightly closer to the wall. The movement was minimal but unmistakable. Within minutes, orders came to shut everything down. The operation was immediately halted, all data was secured, and the entire site was sealed off. The team was removed and instructed never to speak about what they had witnessed. But one thought stayed with them. If even after thousands of years, whatever was inside hadn't gone completely still, then disturbing it might have been a mistake far greater than they had ever imagined.